Hello everyone, this is Afsana, your subject faculty for Business Research Methods. So in this video, we're going to see about testing hypothesis, the statistical method. Okay, so hypothesis. What does this hypothesis means? Hypothesis is a statement or just an assumption about the relationship between the variables. Variables are the questions which you have asked in your questionnaire, right? So those questions will become your variables. There are few dependent, few are independent variable, which we have seen in another video. So dependent or independent, whatever it is, the variables relationship varies from one to another, or this statement, one statement to another. We are just assuming. When we are assuming on a particular research and framing a statement or in between the variables, that becomes your hypothesis. So when you are assuming something, you have some tentative explanation on that particular assumption, so that has to be justified. You have to give the explanation by doing some analytical test. So when you're doing that test, you will be able to find out, is that true or not? To give that results or to give that explanation, you need to do this hypothesis testing. Okay. What is so yeah, hypothesis is a statement or assumption about the relationship between the variables. So hypothesis is a tentative explanation for a certain behavior, phenomenon, or event that have occurred or will occur in future. So when hypotheses are tested, the interesting fact will come out from the research which we do. The bankers assumed high income earner are more profitable than the low income earner. It's just the examples where you will be able to understand what is hypothesis. Means here the banker assumed income earner will be through the high income. In high income earners are more profitable than the low income earners. It's just an assumption. It could be wrong or it could be right also. Second one example here, you can see old client were more likely to diminish CD balance by large amount compared to the younger clients. Means the new clients. So they were able to balance the larger amount with the old clients than the new young clients. So the risk here is on investing the portfolio of asset, right? So assumption on anything. Okay, there are few criteria for hypothesis constructions. When you are creating a statement of your assumption under hypothesis, you need to have certain criteria. It should be empirically testable, whether it is right or wrong. You should find out a statement whether it will come out as a result, it is right or wrong, true or false. It should be specific and precise. It should be more specific. For example, the level of satisfaction towards virtual classes. Is it higher or lower? Students have a positive thoughts towards the e-learning process. So positive thoughts or positive impact, whether it might become true or false, depends on the variables, depends on the questions which you ask for. The statement in the hypothesis should not be contradictory. Okay, it should specifically, the variable between which the relationship is to be established, it should describe one issue only. Only one issue it should explain. It should not bring in too many things. Okay. So now we can see each steps. There are steps to test the hypothesis. I think this image is more clear than the previous one. So here, the steps of hypothesis testing is first, you need to first identify the null hypothesis. There are two different types. Null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, which we have already seen in the class. So, a null hypothesis will be H naught. You can see here H naught. An alternative hypothesis says H1. So H naught says it is negative. So whatever a statement will be given, that will be in the negative form. Alternative hypothesis will be opposite to it. So whatever hypothesis you set as a null hypothesis will be reverse to your alternative hypothesis, opposite to your alternative hypothesis. It cannot be same. You need to have two different statements. One should be in positive, another should be in negative, but both should come out with the result on one analysis. Okay, so two different hypotheses, null hypothesis to be tested. An alternative hypothesis is a statement what we believe is true if our sample data causes the reject the null hypothesis. The fact or the true statement will be alternative hypothesis. Okay, so here you have the chart to explain here. So we have two different type of errors if we get hypothesis. Okay, so type of decision based on the null hypothesis is what assumption I have, and the alternative hypothesis the statement opposite to it. Okay, so it could be on positive or a negative side. Thoughts which I have towards a particular research, that will be null hypothesis. Alternative towards it will be alternative hypothesis. So when the error occurs, type 1, type 2 errors are there. Okay, so when the rejection of the null hypothesis happens, when I have the assumption, okay, and it is true, that becomes type 1 error. Means I try to prove what I am thinking. Means if I think the positive outcome of virtual classes, so there is a positive impact in the virtual classes, it's my assumption, I'm trying to prove it. That becomes your H naught, that is null hypothesis. Okay, so you're trying to prove that assumption. If it is true, the null hypothesis which you found is true, and you could reject it, that becomes type 1 error. Okay, that becomes your alpha. You have something called type 2 error, beta, where your assumption is false and you have to accept the fact. That becomes type 2 error. Okay, there is a two different thing which we can use it for the correct decision. So correct decision here is when your null hypothesis is true and you accepted it, that becomes your correct decision. Okay, and when your null hypothesis is false and you rejected it, that becomes your correct decisions. Okay, so you need to understand to only based on the research and you analyze, not on your assumption. That's what this means. Okay, so here we get back to the same steps in hypothesis testing. Second is choosing alpha, the value p small or usually less than 10%. It is important to consider the consequences of both types of error. You should consider both types of error. Then you need to set the a statistic. It could be a value from the sample data. This value called observed value of a testing statistics. Using some statistical tools and analyze it. Compare the observed value of statistics to a critical value and obtain for the chosen number or chosen A. Okay, make a decision, either reject null hypothesis in favor of alternative hypothesis or conclude there is no enough evidences to reject null hypothesis. It's my research topic. I have some critical thoughts and I come up with the assumption. That assumption can be rejected or can be accepted, depends on the analysis which I do. There will be conditions of null hypothesis and it will be concluded as if H naught is rejected. We need to conclude that alternative hypothesis is true. If null hypotheses are rejected, we should conclude that null hypothesis may be true. Okay, so next we have the concept of p-value. P-value means we need to have the smallest level for which the null hypothesis is rejected. When we are rejecting it, the alternative hypothesis will be accepted, means the opposite of what we think, we need to accept it, right? So on few parameters we need to accept it. See here, so if p-value is alpha, then we need to reject null hypothesis, otherwise accept null hypothesis. So based on 1% level of significance, we need to have, it might go wrong or it might become less. So we need to lie between the 1% level of significance. There is a 1% chance which may go opposite to my result. That is the statement we need to mention. If p-value lies between 0.01 or 0.002, 5, then it becomes 5% level of significance. So there is chances of changing the results of 5%. Okay, so these will be the statements we will be mentioning in the statements. Okay, then next is the different multivariate methods, or we call it as advanced analysis. We have to find out some variables depend on others. If it is yes, then we need to go for dependence method, or if not, then independent method. Okay, so if we are going for a dependent, independent, there are different types which we will see in the next video. Thank you. Thanks for watching.